let's go in with just a basic nutrition case study at the moment. Somebody who you had who just without really doing too much found a tremendous benefit from changing little things in their lifestyle and with their diet, first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a good place to start. And there's probably across all case studies, there's been some nutrition work anyway. Whether the breakthroughs with the testing or the movement or something like that. But a really good example is a guy called Robert. Robert lives in Canada, and we were working together a few years ago. And his particular health challenge was that with his gut, ulcerative colitis. So not something that we're going to treat, but something that he'd been treating for about 24 years when we first met. He got in contact with us saying that he's been experiencing all this abdominal pain and things like that for a good, like more than 2 decades. And he wasn't particularly satisfied for his own well-being because he was managing it. The medications that you're on were managing it, which is great. But also, in the meantime, alongside managing that, he'd just been building up all these other symptoms. He started getting more gut stuff going on, more stomach pain. So not just down in the lower abdominal, but more stomach pain. He's getting bloating and belching, totally nauseous, but outside the gut as well. So he started describing, well, I'm now getting loads of headaches. I've got upper back pain a lot of the time. I've got no libido. So that sort of holistic principle sort of coming out in terms of there are different systems, different tissues, different organs that are starting to struggle and give him a bit of feedback for sure. So we started working together to try and unravel it a little bit more and stop just managing things. And so we had to have a little closer look at things, and we did some gut testing and things. I found a few things out, but it's nothing that was totally jumping out at us from there. And in terms of a good example of nutrition, that's where he got most his gains. So over, to be fair, 9 months. So he did the work and he put a lot of effort in, and he tweaked his diet constantly for that whole 9 months. Actually, when we finished working and he's like, this is great, I feel fantastic, and everything like that, he went on to then go and do a qualification in nutrition. That's how much value it gave him in his life and his health. So he's got a good kind of story to tell anyone else as well. But the typical progress he made and what gave him those kind of results were he went dairy free, and that's fairly a sort of well-known step, isn't it? It's not like an unusual step that people would take, but he hadn't been dairy free yet properly. Partly because he found it confusing. He didn't know whether to start there or start somewhere else and things like that. He'd sort of tried it a little bit before, but it just became stressful because he didn't know what to have instead and things like that. So one of the breakthrough kind of responses he got was reducing dairy and finding a practical, logistical way to actually do that with his diet.
Yeah, that's an important point, isn't it? Because it's like, there's so much information out there in the world of nutrition. If you go to Amazon, there's like 125,000 books on diet and nutrition. What the hell do people do? There's a vegan approach, there's a ketogenic approach, there's a paleo approach, there's a plant-based approach, there's the Atkins diet, there's, the Stephen Gundry plant paradox. There's so many opinions out there that people get confused with the chaos. Mm-hmm. So one of our jobs is to try and provide some order in that chaos and create a plan without people just having to do things on an ad hoc basis. And sometimes just de-stressing people by having that plan can have a beneficial effect anyway. So anyway, that's great. I didn't mean to interrupt. Carry on.
No, I think you're right. I think that we can say how the nutrition really helped him, but it's not just what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. So giving the plan, giving the structure, say we're going to do it step by step, say we're going to do it together, we're going to problem solve, we're going to do it at the right pace, is going to be just as helpful than going dairy free or not, or the next step. But certainly going dairy free from was really, really helpful. It took if he's been eating that food, it was probably just the food that at that time and probably for a long time, his gut was struggling with, his immune system didn't want him to eat, and so on. So it was giving him challenges rather than it being food and nourishment for him. But that said, it's not like that's a one-size-fits-all. You can't just, well, you could, but we don't just tell everybody just go dairy-free and you'll be fine. You'll go and solve your ulcerative colitis or anything like that. That's not our language. That's not what we do, because the next person could go dairy-free and not get the same response. There's no point setting up that challenge. It's more a case of giving him the informed choice, saying this is a potentially valuable step. Could put in place, looks like a priority, let's go do it, let's see what your response is. And it just happened to be one of the key things. You can't also, it's a great example, he had loads of good examples of don't assume something is either unhealthy or healthy at all, because one of the other challenging things that he was doing that was part of his diet that he was actually doing because he defined as healthy, only because he was motivated and he wanted to find solutions, but he was doing some fairly intensive juicing. Okay? Mm-hmm. So, on the surface, juicing is labeled with that's a healthy thing to do. That's what you do to get better, kind of thing. But it was causing him in his physiology all sorts of imbalances and load and just difficulties, if you ask me.
Yeah.
We didn't know that. We were just observing that could easily be the case. So that was one of the priority steps we wanted in place once it was the right time to do that. So it was one of the early things we did. We calmed down his approach with the juicing. We made it more balanced. We changed the ingredients. It did keep a little bit of it in there, but it was not juicing in per se. It was just part of his balanced nutrition. And we found a way for it to kind of work and not actually push him out of balance, which is what it was doing.
Yeah.
That was just as effective as taking a food out of his diet. It was long gluten-free because of his challenges. He was already aware of that. But it was akin to doing that for him, just balancing his juicing approach. So you can't assume something is healthy. Just your body has to do it for you.
Well, I think over the last few years, there's been quite a pushback against juicing in some quarters because a lot of the juices that people use are very high in things like oxalates.
Yeah.
The salicylates as well. And we don't have time to go into exactly what they are, but if you have a problem with metabolizing oxalates and salicylates, that can be toxic. And those oxalates and salicylates just happen to be in spinach and kale and a lot of the green vegetables and a lot of the berries and fruits that people use for the juicing. So you can inadvertently, in trying to do something that's beneficial for yourself, really screw yourself up in the process if you don't understand the dynamics of how many of these foods have both benefits and drawbacks depending on your individual and unique situation.
Yeah. It was the benefits and the drawbacks, the pros and the cons, the advantages, the disadvantages, that the way we coach is inherent in any food or I suppose any step you could do. So instead of me just telling him, oh, you have to go and do this, you don't have a choice in this, you just go away, do that, and you'll be fine, a list of stuff to go and do. It was more of a conversation. It was more about, let's give you the informed choice. Did you know that there are drawbacks to juicing, especially with all the green stuff you've got in there? And that piqued his interest. He was like, oh, I didn't know. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing it this much. And so you would go, right, well, that starts to make sense. And therefore, he was making the step, not just because we told him to, but because he saw the value in kind of doing it. And then he had to go and experience it. And he happened to experience it of like, wow, well, I'm never going to juice like that again because it was causing like potentially like toxicity, like you say. And I'll read some of his symptoms out. He wasn't just having lower abdominal pain. So when you start talking about other changes other behaviors he was doing that could make him toxic, he can then link them to why he's got headaches, maybe, why he does have more inflammation or discomfort in joints and muscles, why he can't concentrate, why he's got potentially hormonal stuff going on with his libido and things like that, why he's anxious, why he's dizzy when he stands up and stuff. So it starts to broaden the conversation outside of just what's going on in your gut, even though that's important. It's like, well, let's start to work with a few other areas. And all of that through the conversations you can have around food. Instead of just handing out the one-size-fits-all, fact that he's juicing starts to open up that conversation to those other things, which is great. Classic, not just the juicing. There were other foods that he was eating because they were healthy, but plenty of people eat because they're healthy. He wasn't just juicing with them. He had loads of greens in his diet, had loads of nuts, seeds, was cooking with olive oil, like in the classic Mediterranean diet and stuff like that. And on changing all these things, some more subtle than others, but he just got better and better and better.
Yeah, so. And that's also fascinating because in terms of scientific literature and the amount of studies that have been done, probably the Mediterranean style diet is the one that is proposed to have the greatest benefit on health. Usually it's in regard to heart disease. You probably less chance of having a heart disease, but it'll screw you up in many different ways.
Exactly.
And nuts and seeds can be very high in oxalates and also lectins and things like that. All of these substances can be very, very irritating to the digestive system. And so here's a guy who thought he was eating healthily, and according to the literature, you could say, he was eating healthily, but for him, it wasn't healthy. It wasn't a great diet at all. And so changing that had a terrific impact on his wellness.